Greetings and welcome back to the Long of the Chosen 1.2 class guides. The last, well, non-Spark soldier that we have in the roster is the Reaper. So today we're going to talk about the Reaper. First of all, before we get into the subspecs or the three builds that I want to discuss, let's talk about the baseline kit a little bit. So the Reaper comes with tracking, which is an incredibly strong scouting skill. So any units that are nearby the Reaper will be revealed even if you don't have line of sight, so you can spot enemies through walls, around corners, all that good stuff. And then there's also, of course, that gives you the option to lob some grenades or rockets or anything else at those enemies that you don't actually see yet, and allows for some shenanigans. So that is already a really strong thing in the Reaper's toolkit. Although keep in mind, of course, that is a limited range thing, and you know, if you're playing the Reaper more as a little bit of a sniper build, you might miss out on that. So that is basically one factor to keep in mind when you have the Reaper on your squad. The other important thing about tracking is if you spot enemies via tracking, the game will not display the detection tiles of those enemies. So be very careful when you move your soldiers around. You might, run into enemies that you know are there, but you didn't see their detection tiles. It's a little bit similar to when you get enemies revealed via battle scanner, same kind of thing. Same kind of problem coming out there. You do start with squad sight, so you can play them a little bit as a ghetto sniper. They don't have quite the aim growth, but they have fairly decent aim, and their weapon gives them 10 extra aim at the start. So honestly, early game, probably one of your most accurate soldiers. Unfortunately, the weapon has kind of poor weapon damage initially. And then, of course, you have Shadow, which is concealment with only a 1 tile detection radius. But that only lasts for 2 turns, but you can, of course, it has a cooldown, and then you can activate it again whenever you need it. Well, when the cooldown's ready, which might not be when you need it. Anyway, really strong scouting tool, and also a little bit of a getaway tool. You also get a movement bonus while in Shadow Concealment. Increased mobility, it says only, I think it's 20% movement increase. Advanced detection by advent towers, yada yada yada, all that good stuff. You can activate this with move only actions, which is going to be relevant once we get to the Staff Sergeant rule, and you have that cheap shot, reposition, etc. Most importantly, worth noting, Shadow is not concealment, and concealment is not Shadow. So if you have any abilities that benefit from one, they might not benefit from the other. And even though the game interface will always show that attacking an enemy, aka throwing a knife, the interface will show the little icon that this will reveal you this action. No, knife throws, no matter if it's a standard knife throw, a crippling strike, a swift throw, or anything else, knife throws do not reveal you from Shadow. It's kind of important to note, because I think this is something the interface still doesn't show correctly, and I still remember my very first game of Long War of the Chosen where I got very confused about that. Anyway, now, when we're talking about the Reaper, we have to talk about Banish, because Banish is a very dominant skill that is so good that it kind of is a little bit hard to justify not building a Banish Reaper, because it really helps you dealing with the Chosen, it helps you dealing with alien rulers, it takes care of boss enemies like sectopods, gatekeepers, all that stuff. So we're still going to discuss 3 different builds here based on the other choices like Tech Sergeant. So we got a Banish Reaper, we got a Death Dealer Reaper, and we got a Knife Reaper. But if we really want to min-max, it's hard for me to not say take Banish, just because of all the thing. Now, Banish has received some nerfs in 1.2, so the cooldown has been increased. I think it used to be every other turn you could Banish. Nuts. Then the aim penalty per shot was increased, so now it's 20 aim and 1 damage loss that with each successive shot. But you can eventually get the new Master Sergeant perk Trooper Data, reducing that aim penalty per shot by 5, and also reducing the cooldown of Banish a little bit. So you kinda now need 2 perks to make Banish really work. But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. So let's look at the core perks for Banish, for Banish Reaper. And I've been very kind of restrictive here with 5 abilities that I would consider core perks. So why is that? Again, this is all about Banish. This is, I would probably only be this restrictive, though, if the Reaper is your first hero class and they're actually going to be in a lot of fights against the Chosen. Like, I've had some campaigns where the Reaper was my third hero that I unlocked, so they didn't get to see that much action. But anyway, Lance Corporal. Blood Trail. +1 damage if the target has been damaged since your previous turn. So either so far in your current turn or in the last alien turn they were hit by an Overwatch shot or whatever. If they took any sort of damage, now you get +1 damage and you can ignore up to 40 dodge. The 40 dodge is especially strong against the Chosen again, because they're some dodgy dudes. So that kind of beats out the other options as much as a nice utility Ghost Grenade is. This used to be a Master Sergeant perk, but no, it's got to be Blood Trail. You know, every one of your shots with Banish, and that can be up to 7 shots, +1 damage. That just adds up to 7. Anyway, moving on. At Corporal rank, Predator. If you Banish something, you probably want to be flanking that target. Outside of all the enemies I mentioned earlier, sure. The boss type enemies, so Gatekeeper, Sectopod, or Hive Queen can't be flanked, but the Chosen can. The Rulers, one of them can, 2 of them can't. But it's still, you have 15 extra aim and crit against flankable opponents. I guess the crit doesn't matter against the Chosen, but still, it's 15 aim is 15 aim. And while Shooting Sharp is a strong perk, 15 aim against units in cover, and 2 armor piercing against units in cover. If we're really looking at Banish as a Chosen killer, then you really don't want to be shooting at them while they're in cover. And the armor pierce does fairly little against the Chosen. If I'm not mistaken, all the Chosen in the current patch have no baseline armor. They can get a perk where they get 2 points of armor after the first time they've been hit, but that's something to just play around with. Like, this shouldn't be the deciding factor on picking Shooting Sharp. So that's why I'd say Predator for pure Banish builds, probably the way you to go. Then Sergeant rank, Silent Killer versus Seer versus Blue Screen Eyes. We're just not gonna look at Blue Screen Eyes because we're shooting with our weapon. Serial, I don't think is very good with this weapon. It's going to be really hard setting up any sort of kill chains with this. I already mentioned in the sharpshooter video that even with a proper sniper rifle that has a way better damage range than the Reaper rifle, Serial is really hard to pull off. And even though you have some mobility abilities here, I don't think it's gonna it's going to work all that well. So you're better off with Silent Killer. Now, Silent Killer doesn't do anything with Banish. Banish will always reveal you, even if you kill the enemy with all your Banish. After all your shots. It might trigger if you banish an enemy and the first shot kills. Maybe then you get Silent Killer. I'm not actually sure. But there are going to be turns where you don't banish, and being able to move around and assist with your regular shots and not getting revealed is really strong, and Silent Killer is my default pick. And then, of course, we talked about Banish, and we talked about how True Predator basically gets Banish back to where it was pre-1.2. So that leaves us with only 2 rows to discuss, and there we go. Lots of options, lots of options. Now, if I really wanted to be stringent about we maximize Banish, where we're looking at Gunnery Sergeant, then we should put a red box here around Soul Harvest, 10% crit chance, with the chance to get even more crit. But if we look at Banish as, again, as a chosen killer, then crit doesn't really matter. So, yeah. It's still a really strong perk. 10% base crit is nothing to sneeze at for everything else, but so is kind of having a different cooldown ability to do a little bit more damage with Deadeye is a nice alternative. And then there's a knife skill in Personal Edge here, which I kind of really like, because sometimes you can just snipe a kill here and there with your knife, reducing your shadow cooldown. If you can even set it up somehow, let's say on a retaliation, turn 1, you snipe something with a knife kill, you get the 20 aim boost for the next 3 turns, Chosen shows up, you're ready to banish with 20 extra base aim. That means more shots that actually land on target. And then Staff Sergeant, which is kind of the meh-ish role. You got your mobility skills, reposition and cheap shot. Reposition gives you a movement action if you are shooting a flanked or exposed enemy. Cheap shot gives you a movement action if you shoot an enemy that has been previously damaged this turn. Similar to Blood Trail, but not, it needs to be damaged this turn. This has taken damage since your last turn. So not exactly the same requirements. So both these kind of nice for some mobility. Then also new in 1.2 is the addition of Swift Throw, a free action knife throw, which would allow you to basically set up a target that you get Blood Trail. Let's say an alien ruler hasn't been damaged yet, so you Swift Throw a knife at them as a free action. Now they've been damaged, and now you can banish then with Blood Trail. It's not so great against the Chosen, because the Chosen get a reaction after taking damage from the Swift Throw, but rulers don't get reactions to free actions, so that's an option to use there. So yeah, that's the banish skill. One more thing to mention with banish, when I'm talking about officer skills, of course, banish really wants an officer in the squad that has the focus fire perk. Focus fire giving you 5 extra aim for each attack on an enemy, and each shot of banish basically ticks up that aim boost by 5 extra aim. So while you do have a reduction of 20 aim here for each shot, it's only 15 aim if you have True Predator, and it's only 10 aim that you lose with each shot if you also have focus fire on the enemy. So in an ideal situation, you have to counteract somehow only 70 aim to make all your, well, I guess only 60 aim to make all your 7 shots, if you get your 7 shots count. 7 shots, ideal situation with superior extended magazine with the continent bonus that gives it 4 extra shots, not just 3. That's the ideal banish situation. Either way, that's a lot of damage you can get on your target, and hopefully your Banish Reaper also rolled some XCOM perks that might further boost their damage. But we'll talk about those later. So what about the other 2 Tech Sergeant perks? Well, let's have a look then. Right, so let's talk about Death Dealer. Death Dealer is more a dedicated sniper. Well, specialized at taking out single targets, but not that big single targets. Let's put it that way. So the Death Dealer perk here gives, by itself, 25% extra crit chance. And when you are flanked, and when you're flanking a target, and you are in shadow, you have double critical weapon damage. The weapon bonus damage. So we gotta be careful here that we're not falling into the Killer Instinct trap, where the whole damage of your critical attack is doubled, but rather the bonus damage of your weapon, which if we look, I mean, for the baseline weapon, that's not gonna be a lot. So I mean, it's already 2 extra damage on a crit, and I think this goes up with later level versions. So this bonus critical damage here on the right, that's the thing that gets doubled if you critically hit while flanking, while in shadow with Death Dealer. So there's a bit of a you know, terms and conditions apply, but it can be some really nice damage later on. Now, since you want to maximize your damage, I still think Blood Trail is the way to go here for +1 damage. Now, you might occasionally be shooting enemies that are not injured, because I still think that Death Dealer can do a lot of damage. You need to kind of get a feel for what your damage range is. Can you one-shot certain targets right away? Or do you need somebody else to hurt them a little bit first so you get the extra damage from Blood Trail? That's something you just have to see from enemy to enemy, and also based on your weapon tag. And then also the other core perk here keeps being Silent Killer just for the utility. Even more so with Death Dealer, since you need to be in shadow to get the extra crit damage. So remaining in shadow for longer is kind of really good. Kind of really good. Alright, and then we have a whole bunch of blue boxes again. So Corporal rank. Again, Shooting Sharp, great perk to get some solid hit chance against enemies that are in cover. You get the extra armor pierce. It's not really great for Death Dealer because ideally you want to be shooting targets that you're flanking. So you wouldn't get the aim and armor piercing since they're not in cover. But you kind of want to crit with Death Dealer, right? So flanking enemies is nice. Of course, you can't always flank the enemies, so Shooting Sharp is still a strong perk. But I think Predator is more enticing to the whole Death Dealer gameplay. I did also include, though, a little box here around Crippling Strike, just because it's really good utility. Being able to maim a target for 1 turn, giving them 0 mobility. We talked about this a lot in previous guides when it came to the XCOM row main perk, you know, as in, hey, if you see that, pick it up, that's super useful. You have it on your class tree, always available, so this is kind of always a little bit of a consideration there. But keep in mind that will reduce the strength of your Death Dealer. Now, coming to the Staff Sergeant row, again, similar thing that we said before. You have your mobility perks, or alternatively Swift Throw for some extra damage and being able to trigger your own Blood Trail. That being said, I think as a death dealer, you kind of play a little bit more up at the front and trying to flank enemies, to get that extra crit chance. And you might take some risky shots, so having a reposition or a cheap shot to get back to safety after taking your shot might be nice. That being said, if you have Silent Killer and you know that you're gonna take killing shots with Death Dealer, then hey, get that extra damage from Swift Roll. Gunnery Sergeant. Big priority here would probably be against Soul Harvest. You want to crit with Death Dealer, so that you get the extra critical damage, and this gives you a flat 10% crit chance, and then with each additional crit you get even more crit chance, so that really stacks up nicely. Like if you were picking up Predator, Death Dealer, Soul Harvest, we're already looking at 50% crit chance just from those perks when shooting flank targets, plus 40% base crit chance, plus, I don't know, does the Reaper Rifle doesn't come with a base crit chance, but hey, if your aim is good enough, put a laser sight on this weapon, and with an elite laser sight, you're already then looking at 100% crit chance at flanked enemies, making those Death Dealer shots more reliable. And at some point, well, you need a lot more crit from Soul Harvest if you get your full 20% here from the 5 kills in a mission, which is not gonna happen in most missions, let's be honest. Then maybe you can also start shooting and critting on enemies that are in cover, but then you lose the Predator bonus. But anyway, so Death Dealer, Soul Harvest even, really good for the Death Dealer perk. I still think though, having an alternative high damage shot here that doesn't rely on crits, especially against enemies that you're unlikely to crit. Anything that is unflankable, mechanical enemies, all that stuff, might be better. It's hard to say. I think stacking the crit. If you can, you have some other tools of stacking crit. Holo targeting from a holo targeting spec, sharpshooter, get some buff from an officer. If you have these kind of tools and maybe somebody in the group with sensor overlays, then really going all in on the crit might be the better choice. If you don't have the tools, then having a backup shot when your crit chance is super low, then you have some alternative way to deal some damage. But you might have noticed that I would definitely prefer Soul Harvest here. We also have a little box around Impersonal Edge. Again, same reason as before. You can occasionally snipe some kills with a knife, reducing the shadow cooldown. And for Death Dealer, you need to be in shadow to trigger the effect. So being able to reduce the cooldown has some value. Does it have the same value as potentially 30% crit from Soul Harvest? Well, that's your call. And then we have 2 options here. Option number 1, True Predator also gives a buff to Death Dealer. It doubles the critical damage bonus of your weapon against unflankable targets. So here you need to be flanking a target and in shadow. So this will not work against mechanical enemies, melee enemies, Archons, that kind of stuff, unflankable targets. So now with this, you get actually the extra critical damage against unflankable targets. Now keep in mind though, if you're shooting at somebody who's in cover, that doesn't trigger. This only unlocks it for unflankable targets, and unit that's in cover, that's flankable. You're not just flanking it right now, so you're never gonna get Death Dealer crit bonus. The alternative then is a homing mine. You throw a homing mine onto a target, when that enemy takes damage, the mine will explode, deal a lot of damage. The secondary effect that isn't really mentioned is that the first shot against that enemy is guaranteed to hit if they have homing mine on them. So it's kind of a nice setup for somebody else to take a high damage shot. For example, again, against an alien ruler or something like that. So can be nice. Also an interesting way to open up on a group of enemies. You know, you mine somebody in the middle of them and then shoot and blow them all up. All right. Well, that's the Death Dealer. Let's see what we can do with a Knife Reaper. Right, so let's look at our knifey boys and girls here. Now, one thing, as a disclaimer again, I haven't played with a full-on Knife Reaper in quite a while. I've played on the previous patches, but not in 1.2. So I haven't actually played with the bigger changes here, but in general, I think the same rules still apply. If you want to make a Knife Reaper work, you gotta invest in your knife builds. That's just the way it is. That starts with Knife Juggler, +1 bonus damage to throwing knives in general, and 1 additional throwing knife, and kills with your primal weapon, so with your vector rifle, gain you additional knife charges. So especially, this is basically a requirement for Knife Reaper, full stop. Once you have things like Swift Throw, things like Knife Encounters, you're going to be going through many knife attacks, so you need the extra charges and you need to get an ability to gain additional charges. Then over here, Crippling Strike, again a knife throw, reducing enemy mobility, very good utility. Now, you could make an argument, and I'm only realizing it now, that hey, Predator is not limited to primal weapon, it is limited to ranged attacks, and I'm fairly certain knife throws still count properly as a ranged attack, so yeah, maybe getting the extra aim and crit is not terrible, but hey, we're going knife here, so let's take the knife perk. We can make an exception at Sergeant Row, where I still think Silent Killer is such a strong perk. Being able to remain in shadow is really good. And I'm not, blue screen knives, disorient robotic units, yawn. Yeah, I wish this had also the hack score reduction that many of these kind of blue screen abilities get, but it doesn't. It just disorients robotics, and yeah, okay, you get 2 ammo pierce on your knives. I do like AP ammo on almost everybody through most of the campaign, so 2 pierce sounds great, but I think as a Knife Reaper you can be a little bit more selective about what targets you knife, and then you might not necessarily need the pierce. But keep in mind, you need to be occasionally shooting your gun to gain additional knives, so being able to do that without losing concealment is kind of nice. Kind of very nice. Alright, then we got Swift Throw. Extra knife throw as a free action. What's not to like? Over here, Knife Encounters then. So this is basically, it's close encounters, but just with a knife. If you have an enemy within 5 tiles, you throw a knife at them, and then it basically doesn't cost you an action, you get a bonus action after that. So that would allow you in combination with Swift Throw to throw 3 knives at enemies, or 2 knives and run away again, or 2 knives and then shoot them with your gun. Lots of different ways to play this out. This is basically your action economy, your doubling your DPS kind of perk. Then next up, Impersonal Edge. We talked about this already on the other ones. Getting kills with your knife reduces your shadow cooldown by 1, and you get a stackable aim buff. That, if you can get a lot of kills, you can really stack that buff significantly high. So, and you can kind of get to a point where you come out of Shadow, you can immediately go back into Shadow by the cooldown reduction. So I think a really important skill for the knife build. Yeah, sure, Soul Harvest might be also interesting as an option. You know, crit chance always great, but I think this is no competition here. Personal edge kind of belongs to the knife build. And then well, we have here Rent the Mark. Now this is a fun perk. So with each hit of throwing knife, you apply a debuff to the enemy, which increases the crit chance against the target by 50%. And this debuff can stack. This is most notorious for myself for having a situation in a campaign where I managed to get so many knife throws in on a Chosen that the Chosen was critable. You know, Chosen, you know, we always say you can't crit the Chosen. Well, no, they just have a buff that reduces enemy crit chance by 200. So if you get 4 Rent the Marks in, Rent the Mark knife throws, which takes a little bit of investment, then voila, you're sitting at 200% extra crit chance, and any base crit chance that soldiers have from flanking, get some, or any other sources, suddenly pushes you into the territory where you might even be guaranteed to crit the Chosen. That's a very niche situation though, but it's still a strong perk, especially against like big boss enemies. You know, throw a single knife throw on a sector pod already means everybody now has 50% additional crit chance against that. That is significant. That is a big boost for the whole team. Now, our good old friend True Predator here also has a little buff in for a knife spec. It increases the range of knife encounters to 6 tiles. Now, an increase from 5 to 6 is not that significant. It allows you a little bit more flexibility in where you move to in order to get that double knife throw off. I think you're better off probably with Rent the Mark though. You can get more value out of this. This is just something where you might have to change your playstyle a bit. You might have to keep it in mind that you have that skill and that you can set up a high crit chance against certain enemies for the rest of your team to take advantage of. And I mean, homing mine is nice. Homing mine is nice and all, but I think it does not quite compare to the other two choices, so no box for you. Alright, let's head over to the wiki and take a look at all the fun XCOM role perks a Reaper can get. Alright, so let's look at the XCOM role perks that are available to the Reaper, and ooh, do they have a selection of fantastic perks. There's certainly something in here for everybody. I don't even know where to start. So first of all, independent of spec, remote start is there as an XCOM role perk. Now this, you know, is your base XCOM 2 baseline Reaper ability that was ripped from them because, oh man, that is so broken. Blowing up a car for 12 points of damage in double the normal radius that doesn't reveal the Reaper. It's really strong. It's still kind of strong picking it up for 30 AP. If you have nothing else to pick up, which I won't believe, because there's so many good options here. Let's start. There's exactly one knife-only perk, but it's a really good one. Tactical Retreat. Movement-only action after throwing a knife. This can happen once per turn. This gives you a lot of options with your knife. Like if you're gonna go Knife Reaper and you see that in your XCOM role, that's probably an auto pick. Although there's other perks that might also be interesting. But yeah, Tactical Retreat, really nice mobility tool. It basically is your cheap shot or your reposition, but for knife spec. So that's a good one to pick up. On the other hand, you know, as nice as this is, you'd probably be more happy to see Hunter's Instincts. You know, +2 damage against flanked targets. That's great for a Knife Reaper, that is fantastic for a Death Dealer, and honestly, the Banish Reaper also probably wants to shoot his Banish shots at the Chosen when they're flanking them. So +2 damage on each shot, that adds up very quickly. So Hunter's Instinct's probably one of the best pickups you can get here. Then you have things like Anatomy. 50% critical chance and 2 armor pierce on all attacks. Again, all attacks, doesn't matter if it's a knife or shot. So anybody who wants to do damage really likes some extra crit, really likes some extra armor pierce. And that also helps you, would basically give me more reason to not pick up blue screen knives, because hey, I get my base armor pierce from this, rather than having to skip on Silent Killer. Then for Death Dealer specifically, bring him on. Extra damage on critical hits? Yes, please. Now, this will not get amplified by the Death Dealer damage bonus, but hey, more damage on crits, and you want to be critting all the time. Anyway, what's not to like? What else good? Needle, shots and shadow have +2 armor piercing. There it is again, some more armor pierce. Now this specifically mentions shots, so it will only apply to your primal weapon. Fairly certain. Yeah, I don't think this says anything. Get close and deal magic damage. Who writes this stuff? But yeah, I'm assuming it's just a primal weapon, so shots taken will have 2 armor piercing. It's not bad, you know, it kind of gives you some more options for your ammo slot rather than relying on IP ammo. So maybe especially then, I'd say nice again on a Death Dealer, then they might want to take some Talon rounds for more crit chance, more crit damage, and instead having then still some armor piercing from Needle. And they want to be shooting from Shadow anyway. Then we have Sting here, a shot while in Shadow that holo targets with an aim, rupture someone, and guaranteed to remain in Shadow. This is a kind of nice little utility thing. You holo target an enemy, you rupture them, you don't reveal. It's on a cooldown. I wouldn't say it's high priority, but it's not a bad pickup. You know, it's nothing I get excited about when I see it in the XCOM row, but it is definitely better than you know, throwing your points into something like Lingering Shadow or something like that, or any of the grenade perks. I think they're kind of a missed opportunity here. Right, Lone Wolf. You might be out there scouting on your own, you get some extra aim from that. That goes never wrong, it's just 10 AP, it's a tier 1 perk. If you have them to spare, hey, that's a good pickup. Something to consider for Banish is maybe Executioner. So basically halfway through your Banish streak, you will probably reach the half HP point of that big enemy, and getting an additional 15 aim then for the last couple shots really helps counteract the aim penalty on Banish. So that might be nice. Then we go, of course, we have Impulse here, you know, if you move 10 aim, 10 crit. Most Reapers, you know, you kind of start with a weapon that allows you to snapshot, so you don't have to be stationary sniper. You basically can move every turn, trigger that every turn. That's fairly reliable to get. It's not a huge bonus. I think it's like not as strong as something like that Anatomy, but again, it's hard to compare these and make a ranking, because you're just gonna get offered one of them. It's not like you have a choice here. Just, you know, see what you have in your row and see if it's worth picking up. I think for the tier 3 offensive, you know, total combat is a little bit of a stinker. It's like 5 aim, 1 mobility. You don't really care about the grenades, but everything else is a solid pickup. Sensor overlays, remote start, executioner, impulse, anatomy. Yeah, we can work with that. What else do we have? Marauder, allowing you to double shots if you take double shots if you didn't move. I don't think you will get many opportunities to do that. And again, your damage, your weapon doesn't do that much damage. You might then switch into a more sniper role, you know, a long-range sniper taking double shots. Maybe that's something. I don't think I've ever had it, so again, just spitballing here. I haven't played with that kind of perk just yet. Apex. For me, it's a chance, of course. Yeah, critical hits your primary weapon have a chance to panic the target and nearby enemies. It's the most fun and frustrating perk in the game, where you know, sometimes you panic 8 enemies that were nearby the one guy you killed, and sometimes nobody seems to be affected for 3 missions in a row. So a lot of frustration, a lot of potential in Apex Predator. Might be interesting though for a dev dealer who is trying to crit with most of her shots anyway, and this is triggered by critical shots, so there's some synergy there. Right, then there's one combo I haven't mentioned yet, because that might completely change your playstyle, and that is having something like rapid reaction plus cool under pressure. I wouldn't take that on its own, but cool under pressure. So there's an interesting thing, right? Shadow drops off after 2 turns, but it drops off at the start of your next turn. At that point, when Shadow drops off, if you were on Overwatch the previous turn, you are still on Overwatch until after your Shadow drops. So what you can do with this kind of combo is get in position. You know your Shadow is gonna drop off next turn. Get into position near an unactivated pod. You Overwatch. They move during their turn, whatever. Your next turn rolls over. Your Shadow drops. The enemies activate. You are still considered on Overwatch. You get your free shots with rapid reaction. And then you get your full free turn still with your whole squad to then deal with that freshly activated pod. So this is kind of a very unique playstyle, something, I mean, the Reaper can do that all the time, right? This kind of being on Overwatch just before you get revealed from Shadow because your Shadow runs out, and this thereby activating a group that scatters, and then you have a full turn to handle them. That's a decent way to activate. There's a little bit of risk, of course, involved because, you know, 2 other pods might walk into vision of your Reaper that is about to get revealed. But hey, everything XCOM has a little bit of risk involved. But so you can always do that, but with cool under pressure and rapid reaction, that suddenly becomes well, I don't want to say a pod wiper because that's unlikely to happen. But you're gonna do a lot of damage to them. So something to keep in mind if you see that combo. You could consider that. If you're feeling feisty about this whole combo, I guess the combo won't work with Long Watch because they won't activate if you're not in direct line of sight. So yeah, I don't think I would pick up Long Watch in this case. And then finally, of course, the Reaper also has a pistol role and can take pistol perks. We haven't talked about them at all. There's very little in the base Reaper tree that really benefits pistols. And of course, pistol shots take you out of Shadow. So for a dev dealer who wants to be in Shadow the whole time, so pistol perks would only kind of benefit on the non-Shadow turns. Same thing for the Knife Reaper. They want to be in Shadow. They don't want to drop Shadow and start shooting with a pistol. And on the non-Shadow turns, they kind of want to be taking some shots with the rifle to replenish knife charges. So I don't think, given also the really good XCOM perks in general that are available here, I don't think that pistol makes too much sense on a Reaper. But if you had some amazing pistol combo with a Reaper, let us know in the comments. Alright, that's our last of the hero classes. We still have the Spark to go to. We still have the to look at officer skills, and I had a bunch of requests for other things to look at guide-wise, and we'll try to squeeze those in over the next days, over the next weeks, between this and did somebody say something about a new campaign starting? Maybe. Alright, for now we're gonna put a cut in here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.